Welcome back to the Cruise Pioneer podcast. And with me today from Gdansk in Poland is Gerry Larsson-Fedde, the Chief Operating Officer of Hurtigruten. Gerry is an energetic and team-focused leader with more than 40 years of experience in the maritime industry. His experience include commanding officer and captain positions in the Royal Norwegian Navy, RCCL and Celebrity. He has held MD and VP positions with RCCL, Norwegian Hydrographic Services, Troms Offshore Supply, Costa and Carnival Maritime. Now, as Chief Operating Officer in Hurtigruten, Gerry puts his efforts into continuous improvements and sustainability by enhancing his team members' strengths. At Hurtigruten, he has launched the ambitious C0 project to design the first larger zero-emission passenger vessel to sail the magnificent Norwegian coast. Welcome on board, Gerry.
Thank you very much, Birgit. Thank you for having me.
So I am so excited to have you with us in the studio today. And I would like to start by hearing about both your company pioneering commitment, but also a bit about your own personal commitment as a cruise pioneer with amazing high-level targets for a clean, waste-free, and nature-friendly operation.
Yeah, as you know, I think Hurtigruten has a long-standing tradition on trying to be in the forefront of the sustainability journey. Hurtigruten started with this quite a few years back with banning the use of or stopping the use of heavy fuel oils, banning single-use plastics, and getting all ships equipped with the shore power connectivity. And then as you mentioned, we are now working on this last project, which is related to coming up with a Hurtigruten ship or a passenger ship that can be operational on the Norwegian coast by 2030 with net zero emissions. So I think joining Hurtigruten now for a little bit more than 4 years ago, one of the drivers for me being in Hurtigruten is obviously the fact that we have a history, we have a long-standing history. We are operating in a very, very sensitive area all the time. And we want to continue doing what we've done for 132 years, for another 132 years. But that also demands that we do certain things also on our ships to be as sustainable as possible, also moving forward.
Yeah, and how did your own personal journey start through all of your years working in maritime? Where did the kind of environmental and sustainability focus trigger happen inside of you?
I think it started getting triggered as I worked with other members of the cruise industry and always looking at news flashes coming saying Hurtigruten is doing this, Hurtigruten is doing that, and I was always thinking, why didn't we do that? Why is always Hurtigruten the one that's telling me that this can be done and this can be done? So obviously then also through my previous jobs where when I worked with the other cruise lines, we also had a lot of focus on environmental programs in all those companies, and taking that a step further when joining Hurtigruten and seeing what actually can be done moving forward on our ships as well. And one of the first things that I got into when I joined Hurtigruten was actually the project of the hybridization of 3 of our ships. So saying that, I started my journey with the maritime industry and with Hurtigruten actually when I was 10 years old, when I was on board MS Midnattsol, where my dad was the chief officer. So it's kind of a little bit of the end of the circle to be back in Hurtigruten now, many years later.
Yeah, indeed, full circle. And of course, it's so interesting to look at this, the whole sustainability journey of the cruise industry into a more kind of like competitive edge and the opportunity for both becoming more business worthy, but also, of course, attract new groups of guests and passengers that normally weren't that into cruise. And I wonder, because of course your ambitions with your project is immensely high. And can you share a bit about your current project? What's the work that has been laid down so far? Where are you ahead of the group's targets? And are there any areas where you really have experienced more challenging bottlenecks or barriers
Yeah, I think starting with the hybridization projects, Hurtigruten, we have invested about 100 million euros in taking 30-year-old ships and making them sustainable by putting in batteries, replacing engines, doing hull modifications to reduce resistance and thereby reducing fuel consumption and emissions. 2 of the 3 are now out sailing on the coast. We see a reduction of close to 23% of the fuel reduction and emission reduction on these 2. And the third one, as I'm visiting now in Poland, hopefully is back on the Norwegian coast by the middle of May. And then we also have, as I said, invested in shore connections on all our ships, so they basically can be plugged in where there is availability. And then we now started about 2 years ago, we started the Zero project, where the focus was not necessarily focusing on what form of energy source you should use on this ship, but more so to look at how can we reduce the energy consumption. Because in my opinion, that's more important, because we can't continue using as much energy in the industry or in general in the world as we're doing today, which is currently always increasing if we want all that energy to be green. So that's why our main focus with that project was, first of all, to look at how we can reduce the energy consumption. And then when we did a feasibility study, we also saw that the way we operate on the Norwegian coast is a very good possibility to look at electrification, because we are going into 34 different ports in 11 days. So we have some opportunities that might be more challenging for a ship crossing the Atlantic Ocean or something. So that's why we ended up with a project that's predominantly based on electrification.
And in a more electrified future, per now, I know there is quite a bit of a challenge to secure enough energy when you land into the ports. Is that a concern for you guys, or do you think that this will get in place both with the standardization of plugs and solution, but also the actual capacity of the grid system?
No, that's definitely probably the biggest challenge with the electrification of a ship like this. We're looking at a battery pack of 74 megawatts that needs quite a humongous amount of power in those ports that we need to charge. And we would need to charge 5 or 6 ports going north and the same going south. And as you said, there's going to be challenges with the grid. And there's going to be challenges with getting the infrastructure also in the ports. It's going to be costly, and I think that might be the biggest bottleneck for this project to go live. So to be realistic, I think looking at a ship in 2030, it's probably going to be looking more like a hybrid electrified ship, if I can say, like a hybrid zero-emission ship, where you have also an engine running on a green fuel that can also charge the battery. So you're not completely dependent on the infrastructure on land, because that is by far the biggest challenge in this project.
Thank you. And that actually brings us very naturally into my next question, where I want to have you diving in with me a little bit in the topic about what we call power couples. I think power coupling is very embedded into the Norwegian maritime culture, with the way that we work together in clusters, with small and larger stakeholders representing the value chain when we work to drive innovations. And I wanted to hear, because I know that Hurtigruten and the group has a long-standing tradition for working in these more dynamic partner and multi-stakeholder structures. And can you provide some examples of how the group work with startups and innovators, and also what you consider as the key benefits when larger stakeholders team up with the smaller players?
Yeah, I think if you look at what we are currently working on, I think we have about 11 stakeholders in our project, and some from big ones to smaller ones. I think the big benefit is that when you work closely with these, they get to understand our needs, but at the same time, they are not kind of how can I say, constrained by tradition or constrained by we always did it this way. They are very, very open-minded, much more open-minded than we are that's been in the business for a long time. We kind of gotten a little bit of a tunnel vision to how we operate ships. And sometimes you really need someone, energetic, coming from the outside with a bright mind, and just come in and say, listen, are you sure you can't do this? Let's try and let's see. And I think what we're seeing is some of these examples on our ships, where we're looking at, for instance, putting sails on the ships, which is something that wasn't the kind of the first thing that struck me. But when you look at these innovators, and you look at the people that are looking at this and investing in this, we do see that there is a lot of benefits from that. So and to me, it energizes me working with these people, because they are so energetic, and that kind of drizzles over to me as well. So it's and as you said, we have a lot of these clusters in Norway. We are part of some of them, which are great incubators, innovator places where we can discuss these things and move them forward. And they are dependent also, obviously, of having larger companies support them in their research, and how they can pilot their whatever their technical innovations are. They can pilot them on board our ships, and try them out and see that things, and then kind of get it more market ready.
Exactly. And I think that's such a huge and very critical gap when we look at the asset heavy and like hardware infrastructure solutions that we're working on really scaling towards the zero emission future. Then of course the innovators, they take much longer time to scale, and they need to work much closer with the market and with the maritime stakeholders to actually create solution that has a market fit in what tends to be quite harsh conditions as well.
Yeah.
And then I wonder if you can share a bit with me about unresolved pain points in Hurtigruten. Are there any additional areas that are within your own operations where you now have set really high targets, and where you have unresolved commitments to ensure that you can improve on the sustainability goals, and where you would be interested in partnering up with innovators and entrepreneurs to power couple further for even more radical solutions? And I think you mentioned one topic already on the access to power, but maybe there are a few other unresolved pain points as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things which is kind of a little bit on the side of the maritime side, but it's a big part of our ships, is obviously food waste, and we have a lot of food waste on our ships. We have been very good at getting that amount down year over year. We've done a lot of various things to get that down, everything from changing the size of the plates, actually, which is actually working better than you would believe. But there is a certain limit to how low you can get that. And that's where you need to start thinking, okay, so what do we do then? So one of the things is, when we went into a collaboration with Myklevik, like a farm in northern Norway, figuring out how we can offload this remains to them. They compost it, and then bring it to the farm. We grow the vegetables there, and then we buy the vegetables back. So it's kind of a circular solution, which then we found out we can't get rid of all the food waste, but at least we can do something with the food waste that has a good result, which this is a good example of. Other than that, obviously, operating the ships on the coast where we are, I think there are a lot more research that can go into, for instance, how you regulate in a more energy efficient way the climate on board the ship, because inside the ship, heating, cooling, because we are operating year round in anything from -30 to +30. And I don't think there's been a lot of focus so far in the maritime industry on insulation, on the superstructure of a ship. There's been a lot of research on that on land, on houses. They are getting better and better on this, but that hasn't been the focus. Everything's been focused on has been below the water, predominantly on ships, to reduce the resistance. Air drag or aerodynamics has a bigger impact on a ship than you would believe. So some of these things, I think, is where we can really start go more into depth and see how we can improve on those areas as well. Because there's a lot of people looking at what do we do with the painting of the ship's hull, how do we reduce the drag. There's a lot of things going on, but sometimes we got to look a little bit outside what we've always been looking at, and try and look at some new things that might have a bigger impact than we believe. And that's some of the things we've seen for the projects we've been doing as well.
Absolutely. And then, I mean, one thing is to deliver with new vessels. But what about your current fleet and the optimization retrofits? Are you looking at carbon capture on board the ships? Are there other things that you are really identifying as core initiatives to also reduce the energy consumption and the negative impact of your current fleet?
Yeah, I think there are obviously we've done on several of the ships, as I said, we've done the hybridization where we obviously took down the emissions with about 23%. I still believe there are options we can do on those ships. We can increase the battery packs. The battery technology has improved quite dramatically over the years since we started that project. We are looking at how can we use, for instance, other types of fuel like methanol on some of the engines, which we are now running a combination of MGO and advanced biodiesel. We could use more advanced biodiesel to reduce the footprint as well. And all the engines we have can run that fuel type. And then obviously there is one of the things we're getting out from the project with the C0 project is we are working together with Technotherm, and they've done a study on board one of our ships how we can reduce the energy consumption of the hotel operation. And we're seeing some really good results on that we can then implement on all our ships. On a passenger ship, at least ours, the energy consumption from hotel operations is between 30 and 50% of the total energy consumption. So there is a lot of opportunities there in the way we're looking at having an app controlled for the climate and everything in your cabin, making the guests aware by looking at the app how much energy they're actually using. Because I think it's a lot about awareness. It's a lot about people being aware that, okay, if I turn that air conditioning on full, or if I'm in the shower for an hour and a half, this is actually how much energy I'm using. And if you want to pull that all away, you can say then there will be a screen on board the ship showing the best 10 cabins this last 24 hours on the reduction of our using least energy, and then you can have a kind of because it's a lot about awareness as well, I think. So that's just a couple of examples of what we're looking at moving forward with our assistant fleet. But because there are benefits to do modernization on older ships instead of building new as well, because there's a lot of emissions coming from building a ship, which you avoid by modifying a already existing ship.
Of course. And I mean, there's a huge environmental footprint regardless of how we build.
Yeah.
Building new is, of course, still causing a lot of emissions. What about the life cycle perspective of your ships once they end, towards taken out of operation? Do you have specific commitments on that part, on the ship recycling and?
Yeah, obviously we are committed to doing that in accordance with the Hong Kong Convention and everything that's came out of that. And obviously now when we're looking at building new, we want to look at that whole life cycle, and we have a work package on that project just for looking at that. So whatever we bring on board, the materials and everything that we see that this is recyclable or we can be reused or whatever. So we clearly have a plan for that. No, we don't plan on getting rid of any ships over the next few years at least. So far we will keep them running. We've done quite a bit of investments on them, so they are quite capable of sailing for a few more years. So, and then we'll see what we do after that.
Super. And then, as a last question that we have on this podcast with the cruise executives, we love to ask you about your perspectives on tomorrow's talents today. Because of course there has been and continues to be a huge challenge to get enough people into our industry. We need really great humans on board with us to build the future of cruise. And I would like to hear you've been both sailing and leading land-based operations. Do you have some specific advice and personal hacks that you would share with talents and existing industry colleagues out there when it comes to specific mindsets, skill sets that you consider really key for those who are eager to join the Cruise Pioneer movement?
Yeah, I think, I've been fortunate. I've been getting the chance to have a great career and traveling around the world. I think a lot of what we are looking for and what's going to be important in the future for the future employees or people that are going to be working for us is obviously you need to have a mindset around sustainability. You need to understand that it doesn't matter which role you're going to be in, it's going to be an integrated part of you and your job in this company or in any company moving forward. I think, understanding how the new systems that are coming, the new technology that's coming, have an interest in that and understanding the consequences of the changes you're doing, having in kind of a little bit more of I hope to see that the marine industry and the maritime industry gets a little bit more, how can I say, a little bit fresher, a little bit more new thinkers, a little bit
More
different.
edgy.
We are known for being a very conservative industry, the maritime industry in general. We kind of need to move a little bit away. I think we're moving in the right direction, but the new ones that I bring into my team and people are coming into my team, I want them to have that new thing. I want them to question why we've been doing things the way we've been doing it for so many years. I want those people that questions that and says, well, why are we doing that? And there's never a good answer to say because we've always done it. That's the worst answer. So I think we will be more open, less traditional in our way of picking the new talent coming into our company and in the industry in general. I think we need to look at other areas than what we've been kind of predominantly looking at previously. It's like, okay, you're a chief engineer, okay, you have technical background, then you can be a vessel manager on land. Today, we're looking at a lot of other things as well in those roles, which I think is it's the only way to go to develop our industry in the right direction.
Super input. And we're also really, really excited to follow the journey of Hurtigruten moving ahead and seeing the realization of your true pioneering commitments. Thank you so much, Gerry, for joining us today. And for our audience out there, keep tuned and follow the next episodes coming up, where we will have both MSC Cruises and a number of other stakeholders leading the way in cruise joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Birgit. Thank you so much.